Hello again. Oh, my voice was weird there. I just ate some peanut butter. I think it's still like rattling around in my throat. Hello. This is Monica Volkmar back with another gait analysis video. Today we have Margy, and Margy is someone that I have met in real life, and she is a anatomy and motion instructor as well. So I know a little bit about Margy, just for full disclosure, and we have her here from her glorious deck in the mountains in California, and I'm jealous. Okay, so I know a little bit about Margy's history, not all of it. I remember one thing for sure about Margy's history that I'm not going to say. And in terms of where she's currently experiencing discomfort, she's actually quite fortunate, or not fortunate because she deliberately does a lot of work on her body, but she's currently not experiencing a lot of complaints to report. However, she does sometimes have like some tweakiness in her right knee. So we'll just keep that in mind. Okay. So let's take a look at how Margy's standing. The idea is we want to get a sense of what is her resting alignment of her skeleton, and then look at how she's navigating that resting alignment dynamically in gait. Margy's a Pilates teacher and a hiker. Those are the main things I would say she does with her body. I'm not even sure she does a lot of Pilates these days. But what stands out initially to me is her left foot just looking a little bit more turned out than her right foot. Her right foot looks a little bit more in a neutral stance, you could say. Her calcaneus looks more or less sitting level on the ground, whereas her left calcaneus looks a little more everted. And that turn out of the foot, we can often associate with a foot that's struggling in some way to find good quality pronation. But at the same token, a calcaneus on the right side that's sitting more flat, we want to know, is it able dynamically to evert and invert? Can that everted left calcaneus invert and evert? And can that level right calcaneus evert and invert? Regardless of the resting posture, can those things move? Now I'm looking at her calves and her knees and her legs. I have the sense that her right knee is a little more flexed, a little more bent, and her left knee is a little more straight. However, I'm not sure if that's just the shadows. And I have the sense that the right side of her pelvis is a little hiked higher than the left side of her pelvis, which might give us a little bit of a spine that is laterally flexing to the right through the lumbars. It's kind of hard to tell. Do her shoulders look to be on the same level? I want to say her right shoulder, her scapula that we can see from the back view, is just a little bit lower than her left one. And it also looks like it's that right scapula sitting a little farther away from her spine, meaning it's a bit more protracted on the right side and abducted. So more space between that medial border of the scap on the right compared to the left. I keep getting drawn back down into her legs because it looks like her left femur is more internally rotated, which would kind of be what we'd want to see coupling with a calcaneus that's more everted. Is that, in theory, if everything was connected well, if you tip to the inside of your heel, it should also move into a external rotation all the way up the leg. I can't tell what her knees are doing, so I'm going to take a look at the front view, hopefully to get a better view of her knees. There we go. Hi, Margy, squinting into the sun. Super sunny on that deck. Okay, so her knees definitely look like there's something interesting happening from this front view. To me, what it looks like is that her left femur is kind of shifted medially on top of her left tibia. Like her left tibia is a bit more bowed out to the side, like a varus. And more of her left leg is on the inside of her left tibia. So I'm not sure if that's a whole body has shifted over to her right foot. And for whatever reason, that left tibia is just like, no, we're not going to go to the right. We need some balance. But it's interesting to have a varus tibia on top of an everted calcaneus. That should not happen together. So that's an interesting thing about her left knee. And that's not the knee that she has complaints about. I do get the vibe that her pelvis is a bit shifted over her right foot. We look down at her feet and her toes. Not sure if this is important, but just look at how her left big toe is a little bit more lifted up at the tip of it compared to the right side. And you can see that difference in the calcanei rear feet. Her left foot looks a little bit more of a pronated posture. Shadows make it hard to tell if one knee looks more flexed or extended. Upper body stuff. You can get the sense that her right shoulder blade, her scap is a bit more protracted. And her right arm generally sitting, it looks like a bit more in front of her body. So she might have a bit of a rotation through her spine, maybe rotated to the left with her spine. Okay, side view. It's her left side view. Okay. So we can see a bit more about her knees here. Let's just look at the amount of the calf sticking out from behind her left leg. You can see her right calf from behind there. That might be showing us that her right leg, her right knee is more extended back. Let's take a look at her other side view. Yeah, that right knee is more extended back. You see that? That's interesting. You can see the left knee here is a little bit of a bend in it, showing us her right leg behind it. But here you can't see her left leg sticking out. Interesting to note here is you can see a bit more of her left kneecap from the side view. But from this angle, you can't see much of her right kneecap. So what is that saying about the orientation of her leg? On this side, it would look like her leg is a bit more internally rotated. The femur is internally rotated. Whoops. And here it looks like she has a bit more of an external rotation in her femur. And from the back view, I wasn't sure about that. I think I said it looked like from the back view, her left leg was more internally rotated. But I wonder if what I'm seeing from the back view is that her femur on the left is more medial to her tibia. So it looks like it's going in, but it's going in more of a frontal plane and not so much a transverse plane. So that's pretty cool. So what's significant about a knee that's extended, but on a femur that's internally rotated? What's interesting about that is that it's not what we want to see happening. And these are mechanics that are not always agreed upon, but from the lens of anatomy and motion, when you look at the knee and healthy motion in the knee, when the knee extends, what we want to see is an external rotation in the femur. And when the knee flexes, we should have an internal rotation of the femur. So she's standing on a knee that looks like it's too extended and the femur going inwards instead of rotating outwards. So yes, that's very interesting. Tweaky right knee. Could that be part of it? You can see from this view a bit more, whoops, her shoulder girdle, it looks a little bit more posterior, so a bit more retracted. This side, her right scap does look more protracted. Okay, so those are just a few things that stood out. That interesting right knee configuration, interesting left knee configuration too, with that medial shift in the femur, and a right scap that looks more protracted, possibly a spine that's laterally flexing right. So why don't we take a look at how Margy is moving? Go to the video. Okay, Margy, show us how you move. We'll watch a few paces in real time to see what stands out. For me, I see a lot of pelvis motion that I can't put my finger on. Lots of hiking, so lots of frontal plane. And I think I am seeing a little bit of a bias towards her. Let's rewind that again. I think I'm seeing a little bit more of a bias towards her pelvis, only rotating. I think we're getting her. Yeah, she was showing us her standing posture. So what I'm sensing is how to even articulate this. My brain doesn't know how to say what it's seeing. Like just a bit of a swoosh into her right leg. Swoosh, swoosh. It appears to be more pronounced, and that's definitely not an articulate way of describing it. I sense also a bit of a pelvis rotation left and not a lot of pelvis rotation right. So pelvis rotation to the left would make it easier for her to get her right leg forward. So here, Margy is going to do something where she stands with her feet right together. Let's just see how this looks with her feet right together, if anything else comes out of that, if anything shows up. So I'll pause that there. Okay. Not sure if we'll see anything that looks incredibly different, but it's a fun assessment to do, to look at someone with their feet right together. Margy actually is the first person that I heard. Ooh, let's go back. Oh, come on. Lost my place there. Okay, you know what? I cannot be bothered to deal with tech. So let's just watch her walk in slow-mo. I was going to say, though, about the feet together assessment is sometimes you really get stuff that stands out that's different when people's feet go together, because it takes away a lot of their default way of getting stability in their stance. And it just reveals some things that might not have showed up otherwise and exaggerates them. And Margy's the first person that ever did that I am aware of, and pointed out the differences she was seeing. And it was really a useful tool, I think. So thanks, Margy, for that. All right, let's get her through a couple of steps and see what we see. So going through her swing, early swing on the right leg. And we do see quite a bit of hiking in her pelvis here. So it did look like when she was walking, that was the main thing that stood out, was like a very busy pelvis. But there's a hike on the left there, dropping on the right. And in a mid stance, we'd like having more of a level pelvis, not a hiked on one side pelvis. We got to move along to see if there's anything different on the other side. So we can see quite a crossed over step. So I want to take her through another step just to see if that's consistent, or no, it's not consistent. So something I've been thinking about lately is that there will be some things in gait that are going to be inconsistent because of the variability naturally that our bodies have. But then there will be some things that are consistent throughout, and those consistencies are kind of where the interesting stuff is. Okay. So consistency in that pelvis staying hiked on the left. And I see a lot of swing in her arms here. Don't have too much to say about that just yet. Just that that's a thing Margy does when she walks, is she swings her arms. That's cool. Okay, so she's striking relatively well on that heel, I want to say. So in a optimal heel strike, we'd have lateral contact on the calcaneus. We can see her toes are up off the ground, so she has a pretty nice dorsiflexion. She doesn't have toes that are sticking out the side. So she's landing with her leg in a pretty good position, although I hesitate to use the words good and bad. And her pelvis is actually pretty level here. So I don't have a lot to say about her right heel strike other than it's a lot of arm swing. Okay. Let's go into a pronated foot. So right foot is pronating, landing on the ground about there. So again, there's a pelvis hike on the right, but this is where we would like a pelvis hike on the right to take place. She's lost the contact with her back foot. So the quality of how well her left leg is supinating from foot to hip may be compromised in some way, but this is quite common for human beings. We'll have to see if it's similar or different on her other side. But knowing that this knee from her static setup is more flexed, I wonder if we'll see that this left leg has a harder time supinating. Knee extension is one of our supination mechanics. So it would make sense that this knee might not want to extend. Okay, to say anything more, we're gonna have to see what the other side's doing. So let's go into a swing through here. So a very different looking swing through on her left leg. We have a bit more external rotation in this left tibia, which makes sense for that flexed knee. So flexion of the knee should go together with external rotation of the lower leg. That's what we're seeing here as she swings through. I'm just curious about the amount of hike she has here on the right side versus what it looked like on the left side. So we're going to rewind and see what her stance is like here. So it's less hike on the left than she does on the right. She hikes on the left, but she has a greater tendency to hike on the right side of her pelvis. Also look at just the general kind of vibe of how her body is stacked on her left leg compared to here. It looks like she's almost leaning off of her leg, like her body wants to go like this. She has quite a bit of hike in that pelvis, and it looks like quite a bit of rotation to the left in that pelvis. But it's like her body is leaning over to the left, not fully committing to that leg. So interestingly, if you have a pelvis that's rotating left, what do you reckon that left rotation in the pelvis will do to the right femur in the transverse plane? Let's say this is her femur. Is that femur going to rotate in the same direction as the pelvis? In theory, yes. So remember how her right femur looked really internally rotated? So what we might have here is this pelvis rotating left, and it's pulling her right femur into a left rotation, which is an internal rotation in this case. So I'm not sure why that's happening, but that seems to be something that's going on. So we're kind of curious about, well, what's up with that left pelvis rotation, Margy? Because it's showing up when your pelvis should be rotating to the right, and it's kind of dragging your femur into a left rotation. Is that part of that, what's keeping that knee kind of twingy sometimes? So if we go back to where we were, getting ahead of myself, arm swing. No, I wasn't there yet. We were just getting into this. Where were we? I'm all lost in my brain now. So we were in this right mid stance. That's where we were. Okay. Ooh, I got lost in time and space there. So we left off with this right mid stance, and now we're observing that there's a bit of a hike on the right that's more than when she's in this same phase on the left. And there's a bit more of a left rotation in her pelvis. However, do you recall how her calcaneus was more neutral? What's going on there? It's hard to see. But it would be interesting for her calcaneus to be neutral, neutraler than her left one, which was very everted. Considering the amount of rotation going through her pelvis here, in theory, we would see that rolling her onto the inside of her heel, which would couple with an internal rotation through her ankle and rear foot structures. Excuse me, that was a hiccup. But I'm not sure if we're seeing that in her lower leg. So there is definitely some kind of disconnect right in that juncture there between her femur and her tibia, aka the knee. So anyway, let's see what happens when she goes into her late swing on the left leg, and there she is in heel strike on the left. And we can see there's still quite a bit of a hike in the right side of her pelvis. Quite a bit of arm swing. That's where I got lost in time and space, because I caught a glimpse of her arms, and I was curious about if the arm swing is the same as on the other side. So lots of arm swing. Bear in mind, this is the phase in which we'd like to see the arms approaching end range of their swing before changing directions. Let's remind ourselves of her right side. This is kind of interesting about her forearms and her elbows. So make note of the shape of this arm here and see where her palm is facing. So her palm is facing kind of towards her left with her pinky finger up to the sky. And this elbow joint looking quite extended. And then if we just go into the other side, it's a bit of a different position of this forearm, isn't it? It's not Just gonna have to do that with my own arm now. So if you turn your pinky finger up to the ceiling versus having it a little bit more, look at that. I'm trying to be Margy's arm right now, and I'm not sure I'm doing a good job. But her elbow also looks less extended there. You can see more of the bone. And here, and you see how there's the bone's like hidden. It's getting sucked in into a deeper hyperextension there. So she's got more hyperextension. I call it hyperextension compared to her left side. So the elbow's more hyperextended and the knee on her right is more hyperextended. I want to say, I'm still like not sure how to describe this angle of her hand because I couldn't figure it out in my brain, in my body. But it looks like this is more of an internally rotated forearm compared to here. It looks a bit more of a externally rotated forearm. So in terms of like absolute range, she's moving her arms through. Look at how far her arms are going, and then look at how far her arms are going here. I have the sense that this is less arm swing when her left leg goes forward. And just a bit, yeah, a greater excursion into arm swing, I suspect. So is it both arms? In which case, if it's both arms going farther, we might be seeing her spine better at rotating to the right. Oh. Oh. Does her spine rotate left? It doesn't look like it. But I do have a sense of a bit of a right rotation in her spine. Does her spine rotate left? I don't think it does. It does a bit of a lateral flexion to the right. You can see it in particular right here, where it's the most visible with the sun in the shadows. I don't know. This is something that I would love to be in person to look at more closely. Don't think her spine wants to rotate to the left. I don't know. I just feel so incapable at observing the transverse plane from a frontal view. Maybe other people are better than me at it. So I'm going to put a question mark next to that left rotation of the spine. Can you do? Anyway, where did we leave off? That's right. We left off here in her left heel strike. So she does land on the ground a bit more in that external rotation with her lower leg. She does stay a bit hiked on the right side. Was she hiked when she went into her right heel strike? No, she's pretty level here. So that right pelvis hike is something quite persistent that we're seeing. Right hike. And so we have a third phase where we're seeing a right pelvis hike more predominant than the left. So what does a right pelvis hike give us? A right hike of a pelvis will give us a adducted hip. It might also give us an internally rotating femur. And what it should give us is a flexing knee. However, this is where Margy's body is not doing that. So something's interesting happening there. So a big question for Margy might be, can you adduct your left hip? Oops. And why or why not? Because what's interesting to me is when somebody has a persistent complaint on one side, so for Margy, it's her right knee, but yet she seems adducted in that hip. And an adduction indicates that the body is getting more of the center of mass onto that leg, at least through the lumbopelvic kind of area. But you'd think that if a body was responding to inputs, potentially ones that feel unsafe, that it would remove itself from those unsafe inputs by doing the opposite. Like, nah, I'm going to hike my left side and I'm going to put my pelvis to my left leg because that doesn't feel good over there. But yet we see her still in a position where she's adducted. So something's keeping her there. That may be prior to her knee bothering her. What is that thing that's keeping her there? And that's going to be maybe in her history. Maybe in her history. I'm not going to give any hints. There's one thing I'm thinking of. Yeah. Oh, it's coming back to me. Full disclosure, Margy and I did a session together when I was visiting her a few months ago in June. I went down to visit her in California and we did a session together. So I did get to work with her body a bit. I forget a lot of stuff, but I do remember one thing from her history now that I'm not going to share, but it might be relevant. Anyway, where did we leave off? Here. Another interesting thing about the arm swinging. So whenever we're getting our mass into our front leg, which is gait, we're perpetually moving our mass into our front leg, the spine needs to rotate towards the front leg. So if your left leg is swinging forward, as we see here, we'd want the spine to rotate left and this arm swing to be such that the left arm's back and the right arm's forward. I think that makes a lot of common sense. However, we also, I mean, maybe not we, I am suspecting a lack of left rotation in her spine. So it's another mechanic we're seeing that might be showing us that she's not super happy to get onto her left foot. So also being the more pronated foot, I wonder if anything ever happened to this ankle. Was there a sprain? Was there a broken bone? Anything like that? Let's move her into her back to the beginning of her cycle here. So one thing that's consistent both sides is this tendency to hike a lot in her pelvis. So when we see a lot of hiking both sides, it's not a bad thing. It just might be her uniqueness, her fingerprint of gait. She just might be a bit more of a frontal plane person. But that begs the question of how well can she move through other planes with her pelvis? Can she equally flex and extend her hips? Can she equally anterior and posterior tilt her pelvis? I'd be curious about that. I think I got time to just do a little look at her front view, and I got to get back to real life. So let's get into a mid stance on, well, actually that was interesting. Let's take a look at heel strike on the left leg. And see what's happening there. Does her pelvis shift towards her left leg? It does a little bit. Interesting, we can see that varus angle in the left tibia that we saw in her stance. So it doesn't look like, I don't know. Knowing how my varus angle right leg feels, I don't like it. I don't like how it feels in my body. I wonder if this is it's causing any niggles for Margy. It might be totally fine. And let's see how long it takes for her big toe to get on the ground on the left foot. So let's watch her big toe. When the big toe finally lands, that's our pronation. It doesn't really ever get down, does it? That showed up in her static stance too, that her big toe is just a bit more up. And I wonder if that's a way that her foot is balancing itself out, because remember that calcaneus was quite everted, tipped inwards. So that big toe, it just might not go down as far if it's trying to not collapse the whole foot into the ground. This is a little exchange we might be seeing in her foot. So where should we say that her pronation actually starts and stops? Because if her big toe never goes down, we could say, like, technically she never pronates. Or we could just kind of stop here and say that looks like her best pronation, which is interesting because now she's in mid stance and we want pronation to happen like more there, but there is not. So would that be one possible mechanic that would make it unsafe feeling or unsupportive feeling or untrustworthy to get her weight to her left side? Maybe we want to look at the quality of her big toe flexion. When she's pronating her foot, can she get her big toe to actually flex so it gets on the ground a bit faster? Or is that big toe necessary right now to be up? And would we rather actually want to look at getting her rear foot, her calcaneus and talus on the left, to supinate a little bit nicer? Something to clean up the timing of how this foot's landing on the ground. Okay. And could it be that if this stuff here that looks a bit disorganized was going on for long enough, I don't know, she might want to put her weight more into her right leg, and for some reason she's in her right leg now, but her pelvis is stuck rotating to the left for another reason, I don't know. And then she's getting this internal rotation through her femur that's doing some wonky stuff with her knee. I don't know. I'm just rambling out of my brain in real time. So nothing I say is necessarily true, which is awesome. I love it when I can just ramble and it not be actually true. So liberating not to be right. Okay, so mid stance we observed is kind of like this no man's land between pronation and supination. We have a bit of a hike on the left, but we already knew that was happening. Big arm swing. And yes, it does look like it's more clear from a front view. We're getting some right rotation in her rib cage here. Why don't we backtrack and look at her left rotation of her rib cage? So she does rotate left. And actually, I think it's better than her right rotation from the front view anyway. That right rotation looks kind of limited, but then her arms swing a lot more. So that's kind of interesting. So that big arm swing here with the left arm forward, right arm back, that might be to help her rotate her spine to the right. Could be. I mean, again, I saw something different from the front and the back. So what's true? I don't know. This warrants investigation. That's the fun part when you have questions that you're stumped on. Is this is where we go deeper with some more close assessment of these structures. But what I'm a bit more confident in saying is that her spine actually doesn't want to rotate to her right. Maybe she's already rotated to the right and she can't go any further. So it's her arms that are swinging there. I don't know. I don't know. So let's look at the quality of how her knee is bending on the right leg. So heel strike and rolling into pronation. Her foot pronates faster. So she's there, but it's still a bit slow because if we're looking from the front view when her toes get on the ground, she's finally pronating fully in mid stance. So we might just want to tidy up her pronation and supination. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's throwing that off, that timing off, that she's pronating so slowly. I don't know. Maybe we want to minimize the hiking that she's doing with her pelvis and get her foot to move a bit more instead. So one thing that could be interesting to explore is trying to access pronation without so much frontal plane pelvis. Is that a thing that's possible? So it's happening on both sides where her foot's pronating really slowly. So that might be one thing to play with just as a generic thing to do. But interestingly, like if I had to guess which knee would be her complaining knee, I guess it was her left one. If I didn't know anything about her, just the angle of it looks less comfortable. This one, interestingly, looks more like straight through her leg, but we know there's that rotation thing going on, that left rotation of the pelvis, pulling her leg into internal rotation. But that rotation not translating down into her foot as it does on the left side. Okay, so if we finish there at analyzing this, the questions I'm left with are left leg, any history there, foot, ankle, knee, hip, anything ever happened on that left side that we're seeing that more eversion in the foot, and we're seeing less adduction. Can your left hip adduct? And can your right hip abduct? What about the arm swinging and the spine rotation? Which way is your spine actually rotated, just standing at rest? And can it rotate equally right and left? Because I suspect there's something interesting to see there. Spine rotation, what's it doing? Because I'm not clear on it. And that right elbow being really extended and having such a high amount of extension in the arm. So the elbow's more extended, but also the arm swinging backwards is greater. So that's greater extension in the arm generally, the whole thing. And can we get that pelvis to rotate right? Can the pelvis do a right rotation? Because I think that would be something I would want to get into as if Margy's knee is the main thing that's bugging her and her pelvis is doing this thing where it's rotating left and pulling the femur with it. That's the first thing I'd kind of want to try and just see if that does anything valuable for her. And then go from there. So thank you, Margy, for your video. If you would like to fill us in on some important history, that would be awesome. Please leave us some notes in the comments. And anyone else who has observations or thoughts or queries for Margy or myself, also pop your comments into the box below this video on YouTube. Hope this was a valuable use of your time. And even if it wasn't, it was fun for me. If you'd like to submit your own video for me to look at, please get in touch with me. Happy to do so. Having fun with it. And that's all I have to say for now. See you next time.